and I would really appreciate it if you would stop Rob Taylor from blathering on and on.
Opinions expressed by talk show hosts, callers, or guests on the Rob Taylor Report do not necessarily represent the opinions of the hosting platforms, subsidiaries, sponsors, or possibly anyone else on the planet or the known universe. From the tinfoil and lead-lined broadcast bunker on the beautiful southern coast of Oregon, it's the Rob Taylor Report. So strap yourself in. Your weekly political therapy session is about to begin. Ladies and gentlemen, here he is, the nearly famous Rob Taylor.
Hey, Coos County. Hello, Oregon. Hello, America. East Coast, West Coast, and beyond. I want to thank you all for joining me today. This is a pre-recorded program, and I'm very excited about today's program. You know, there's not very many things that would keep me up late at night, but something kept me up late last night. And that was a documentary that was just absolutely fascinating. As many of you know, we've got a huge BOEM wind turbine project that's going to be forced upon us here in the South Coast. And we are looking at ways to challenge that. And the only way to really challenge that is the knowledge to argue against it. And someone put out an incredible documentary. His name is Robert Bryce, and I highly recommend it. The name of the documentary was Juice: How Electricity Explains the World. And I've got news for you. Electricity, all energy in itself is something that fuels all societies. And the more plentiful and inexpensive energy that you have, the better off your society is going to be. In fact, he wrote a really good book that's called A Question of Power: Electricity, the Wealth of Nations. And that's a great term from the book. I'm sure he got it from The Wealth of Nations in itself. And so that was the Adam Smith book written pre-Revolution America. And all economies run on energy. It's the most important thing. So I'm very excited to have Robert Bryce with me today. And joining me right now is Robert Bryce. How you doing, sir?
Excellent. Thank you for having me on.
Well, I'll tell you what, it was, it's something that's really near and dear to the hearts of Oregonians on the South Coast. I mean, Oregon is not a place where everyone is the same. People always look at Oregonians and they think we're all a bunch of Portlandiers, but we're not Portlandiers. There's rural Oregon where we feel like we're still sane. And we feel like we're being dominated by people in the larger cities who want to push projects like the wind turbine projects that BOEM is pushing on us. And we want to find ways to fight it. And like I said, you just put out a documentary and you've got a series now that complements that documentary. Why don't you tell us, how did you get started studying the subject of energy, specifically electricity, and what made you make these documentaries?
Sure. Well, again, thanks for having me on. I guess I'll, if you don't mind, Rob, I'll just make a quick introduction. So I'm a Texas-based journalist. I've been a reporter my whole career, never had a real job. What is my story? Well, first things first, I'm married to one wonderful woman, Lauren, and I've been married 38 years. We got 3 great kids, Mary, Michael, and Jacob. They're all grown and healthy. And so I'm incredibly fortunate to do what I do. Written 6 books, co-produced 2 documentaries, as you're saying. You used to do a podcast, but I do a lot of public speaking on energy and power. In fact, I've been in Canada last week and Kansas earlier this week, speaking to the electric cooperatives in Kansas. So this is what I do. I don't have another job. But as far as how I got into writing about energy and then ultimately into making a couple of documentaries, some of it's dumb blind luck, some of it's right place, right time. I grew up in Oklahoma. I grew up in Tulsa, in the energy industry, of course, had a big role in Tulsa when I was growing up, less so now. So I grew up around people who were in the business. as I started in journalism, I started writing about energy and power. In 2001, I started writing about Enron for a digital publication. I was writing for newspapers before that. And that led to my first book, which is called Pipe Dreams, Greed, Ego, and the Death of Enron, now 22 years ago. And then that led to all in a series of other books. And then as I started my latest book, A Question of Power, I thought, well, I should make a documentary while I'm writing a book. How hard can that be? Well, it's not easy.
It's not easy, right?
And I don't think I'd recommend it to anyone else, but it was a struggle, but I got it done. My colleague Tyson Culver, we did two documentaries together. He has done just a great job directing, and so here we are now, 6 books, two documentaries later, and of course, there's a lot of focus these days on energy and power, and in particular on the electric grid and on the offshore wind scam, because that is the correct word for the entire thing. And happy to talk about what's going on the West Coast, but I've been was on the East Coast. In fact, in July, it was in Nantucket and in Newport, speaking about offshore wind. It's a bad idea. It's bad for ratepayers, bad for whales, bad for the industrialization of the oceans, bad for view sheds. There's nothing that's positive here. It's tremendous waste of money. And there are so many things wrong with how this is being permitted and carried out. And you're just getting started there on the West Coast. But I hope you all can stop this madness, because as a commercial fisherman told me the other day, he summed it up really well. He said, we know really very well how to make electricity onshore. Why are we trying to do it offshore? He said, right. I've worked all my whole career, his whole life. He's been been a fisherman. And he said, I know the saltwater environment and how hard it is to keep things up. He's, the idea that we're going to put these massive machines out in the middle of the ocean and expect them to last, it's a fool's errand. And we've already seen the wind turbine blade disintegrating off the shore of Nantucket, which I hope we can talk about.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you're going to love this. The wind turbines that they want to put off the coast of Oregon is going to be anywhere between 13 and 34 miles out in about oceans that are 3,000 to 4,000 feet deep. They're going to be floating platforms that are going to be cabled to the floor of the ocean, and they're going to be twice the size of the Statue of Liberty, with wingspans the size of football fields. Oh, yeah. And they're going to be a mile apart, and they plan to do 260 of these, and they're only going to get 3 gigawatts of energy, and they're putting it in the most hostile part of the ocean. I don't know what it's like on the East Coast. I mean, I used to live in Texas and Harlingen down by the Gulf, and I'm very familiar where you're at because I used to live in Wichita Falls. But this is going to destroy our fishing industry because it's in the most pristine part of the ocean, but it's also in the part of the ocean that is so volatile. There is no way these things are going to survive what's coming at them.
Well, the entire exercise, Rob, is just it's foolishness. And, you're right to be questioning what this idea of floating offshore wind turbines, because first of all, people say, oh, well, look what's happening in Europe. Well, they're putting those offshore platforms in relatively shallow water. I don't know. It's several hundred feet, right? It's not thousands of feet.
Right.
The West Coast, the continental shelf drops off very quickly when you move out from the coastline. The eastern seaboard, that water isn't as deep as on the West Coast. But your point about the gigantism of what we're seeing with these offshore turbines is right on target. And I wrote about this on my Substack, robertbryce.substack.com, just a couple of weeks ago in a piece called Breaking Wind. It was on July 22nd.
That's a good one.
Well, sometimes you come up with the right headline, and this was the right headline. But you mentioned the scale of these turbine blades. Well, one turbine blade so just back up very quickly. So I spoke in Nantucket and Newport on July 7th and 8th. July 13th, that's Saturday, one of the wind turbine blades on one of these GE Vernova wind turbines, a 13 megawatt model, disintegrated. It fell into the ocean, and in calm weather. Now, the eastern seaboard, you're going to get hurricanes. You're going to have nor'easters. What happened? Well, it's a Haliade X blade. It's 107 meters long. That's a football field in one blade made out of fiberglass. So in other words, these These turbines are so big. And you look at the rotor size, well, because then the scale of the entire, you take the diameter of the circle of the rotor, it's going to be about 220 meters. That's 6.5 times wider than a 737. And each blade weighs 70 tons. So, this idea that they're going to do this and that it's going to work. No, it's not. There's no way this will work. And we've already seen this happen with a turbine blade disintegrating in calm weather. Well, what's going to happen in salt water, in severe weather? These turbine blades are going to break. They're going to fall into the ocean. And remember, it took weeks. They're still recovering debris from this fiberglass blade that came apart offshore Nantucket. So it's just a date with disaster. And,
yes,
let's talk. I hope we can talk about the environmental betrayal by these NGOs that are cheerleading for all of this, because it is frankly appalling.
In fact, that's, I never thought I'd find myself as someone who's a libertarian and conservative who is out there now carrying signs that are saying save the whales. I never thought, I thought it was cool in college when the college girls were doing it back in the early 80s. And, it's, oh yeah, I'm for saving the whales because, the girls were cute and you wanted to get into what they were doing. But now here I am, a near 60-year-old man carrying those same signs, save the whales, and it's legitimate. You know what I mean? It's going to kill.
Of course, it's legitimate. And,
right.
And imagine just for a damn minute, imagine if the oil and gas industry had come along, and Exxon or Chevron or Phillips or whoever, Marathon or Petrobras had said, we want to put hundreds or even thousands of offshore platforms on the eastern seaboard in the middle of known habitat for the critically endangered North Atlantic right whale. The NRDC, the Natural Resource Defense Council, Sierra Club, Conservation Law Foundation, Earth Justice, you name it, they would be, Stop Oil, they would be protesting in the streets. They'd be laying down in front of the ships. They would be out there, going absolute apeshit crazy.
Yep.
But because it's the wind business, crickets. Oh, it's no big deal. The whales are going to like it. The winds, the whales can just suck on it. They're going to be okay. And, but I'm with you. I mean, when I was a kid, it was kind of a joke. I'm a little older than you you are. I just turned 64. It was like a joke when we were growing up. It's save a gay baby whale for Jesus. That was kind of like, like this is, but it was a parody. But that was because that was, the NGOs at that time, they were the feisty upstarts. Now they are part of the establishment and they're firmly in favor of this absolute debacle. And who are the companies? And I'm just going to tell you, Rob, here, who are they in bed with? You can look at the Alliance for Offshore Wind in New York, the New York Offshore Wind Alliance. Who's on the steering committee? The Sierra Club and the National Wildlife Federation. And who are the other members of the steering committee? Equinor and a company called Attentive Energy. Well, who are they? Well, Equinor is the state-owned oil company out of Norway. Attentive Energy is a subsidiary of Total, the French energy giant. Who else is building offshore wind? BP and Shell. The NGOs who claim to care about the climate are in bed colluding with foreign oil companies. I mean, just imagine. I mean, did they think we are not paying attention? I mean, It's outrageous. It's just outrageous. And they do it with a smile. Oh, it's no big deal. And the wind turbine blade comes apart. Well, we need to figure this out. Oh, you think so?
Right.
I just think these, the way these NGOs have behaved is just absolutely appalling.
And it's not just whales. We've got one of the rarest endangered species here is called the short-tailed albatross. And the short-tailed albatross, the flying pattern of the albatross is going to go right through the call areas where they're going to put up these wind energy plants. I don't like to call them farms, but they're plants. It's in the industrialization of our oceans. And not only that, I've heard that the crabs will collect on the energy lines and not go through the molten process and age into mature clams. Crabs. The crabs will not. They gather on the energy lines and they just stay there and they don't molten. and it's going to destroy the crab industry here in Oregon. We provide a whole lot of crabs for the entire nation, and this is not only going to affect us, this is going to affect everyone, restaurants from here all the way to the East Coast.
Well, I can talk seabirds all day long, Rob. I'm a lifelong bird watcher, proudly so. And I can nerd out on birds all day long. And I can also nerd out on whales. And I'm very fortunate in my career. I travel a fair amount, and my wife, Lauren, and I were in Canada a couple of weeks ago, and we went whale watching in British Columbia, and we saw a humpback. And while we were offshore, we also saw marbled murrelets and redneck phalaropes and tufted puffins and American oyster catchers, just marvels of wildlife. And now I'm looking at, I wasn't aware, didn't know about the short-tailed albatross, but yeah, I'm looking at the map, and where is the habitat, or where do they live? Right off the western coast, right where all these stupid wind turbines are supposed to go. And, oh, well, what's going to happen if one gets hit? Oh, well, who's going to be around to know? The birds are going to fall into the water. They'll never be recovered. So, it's just the environmental betrayal here is absolutely gobsmacking. And the fact that these companies are doing it, saying, oh, it's no big deal. Well, of course they don't say it's no big deal, because what are they doing? They're after the tax credits, and the tax credits are incredibly lucrative, where they can get roughly 40% of the cost covered through the investment tax credit. So, this is it's a run on the treasury by foreign companies in the name of climate change. And they're in bed with some of the biggest NGOs in America. They're not environmental groups. They're climate NGOs. And their attitude toward all of this is, again, I'll say it, absolutely appalling, just absolutely appalling.
And it is all about the money, because in the contracts for the leases, if they lose any money, the companies who lease the call areas, they don't suffer any liability. We have to pay for any losses of the company, number one. Number two is that if there's any maintenance required on these, and which they will be, we have to pay for that. If there's any hazardous debris coming off of these wind turbines, which there will be, because like I said, it's in hostile environment out there in the ocean, we're responsible for the cleanup. And when I say we are, the taxpayer is. And I just found out, you're going to love this little scheme. There's going to be 262 of these turbine monsters out there, and each one of them, they're saying they're going to create an LLC for each individual wind turbine, so that they have a limited liability if anything happens to any individual turbine, and they'll just go bankrupt for that one turbine. And we, once again, the taxpayers will pick up any mess that's caused by it. This is phenomenal.
Well, I didn't know that. It doesn't necessarily surprise me, because, look, we're in this age of corporatism, where you have these massive corporations that are involved in this. It's not mom and pop organizations. You look in the oil field, and I'm fairly familiar with the oil and gas business. There are a lot of small operators, mom and pop business. Small ones, with a handful of employees. The projects that you're talking about with offshore wind, they cost billions of dollars, and they're incredibly expensive to build. The lead times are can be decades long. And this is news to me. What you're telling me is that, of course, that the ratepayer is the one that's going to pay the bill. Of course, the idea, you look at the power purchase agreements that have been signed or agreed to, and I wrote about this on Breaking Wind, and another piece that I wrote on my Substack about wind energy. The costs are they're staggering. I wrote a piece that was published July 15th. The headline is "The Offshore Wind Energy Scandal is Even Worse Than You Think." When you look at I'm just finding in New York, there was a project called Empire Wind. The state gave them a contract for the offtake of $155 a megawatt hour. Well, last year, according to the New York Independent System Operator, the average price of wholesale power in New York last year was $39. So New York residents are going to pay 4 times more for this offshore wind electricity than they would from standard power but it's all being done in the name of climate change. And who's making money on this? It's these big corporations, mostly foreign outfits. I mean, it all stinks. It stinks from top to bottom. And these corporations are just lining up to, queuing up to get the money. And in many cases, the state governments are their willing accomplice. And the other willing accomplices here are these big NGOs. I mean, it's just a ripoff of the ratepayer. It's bad for the environment, bad for whales, bad for scenic views. But it's all, this craze around climate change where anything is justified because of this fetishization of renewable energy.
And so I kind of want to divert because I got a good question for you. Since you're from Texas, I lived in Texas. I've lived all over Texas, and one of the areas I lived in was Lubbock, and I lived in Amarillo for a while. In fact, I lived in a little town called Muleshoe, Texas.
Oh, sure.
Oh yeah, right on the West Texas. And I always joke. I was joking with the commissioners last night because we were at the Board of Commissioners meeting, and I said, only God could make a country as ugly as West Texas, except for the federal government, because now the federal government has leased out a lot of those areas in West Texas. And so if you drive from Amarillo all the way to the Texas border, it's wind turbines as far as you can see. So my question for you is, there's a lot of people who are opposed to the offshore turbines because they don't want to pollute the ocean. But there are a lot of people who still support on land turbines. What is your thought on the difference between the two? And are you opposed or for either one of them?
Well, I'm a longtime critic of the wind business, proudly so.
Okay. Good.
I'm sure the wind guys don't like me. Well, I don't like them back.
Right.
Because I've seen how these companies operate in rural America and how they have behaved, tried to bully small communities, bully individuals. And if the oil and gas industry was acting like the wind industry has acted onshore, it would be front page news of the New York Times. But it doesn't get covered because it's not part of the narrative. But so to answer your question, yes, I'm a longtime critic, proudly so. And I keep a database. It's the Renewable Rejection Database, which is on my website, robertbryce.com. You can also Google it very easily. There are now, I think the latest number, 711 rejections or restrictions of wind or solar in the United States since 2015. The local communities across the country, and in fact, all over the world, Australia, Bulgaria, France, Italy, they're rejecting large-scale wind and solar projects. In Canada, I was in Canada last week in Alberta. The Provincial Utilities Commission in March implemented a 35-kilometer setback for any wind or solar projects from any scenic areas. They also enacted measures that protect ag land. So this backlash against this alt energy craze, this renewable energy fetishism, is happening all over the world, and it's particularly strong on the coast because of the concerns for the offshore concerns for view sheds, ratepayers, power lines, etc. But it's raging across rural America, and in fact, I'm going to be in El Dorado, Texas next week, talking about a massive project that is being proposed for that region, where the local ranchers are saying, we don't want this. They're going to use all our water. They're going to destroy our view sheds. This is bad for us.
And from what I understand, the ones on land, because all of them need water to cool the generators, as from what I understood. So in the ocean, they actually pull water into the turbine to cool the generators. And I saw where it was killing there was an article that it was killing small fish, but it also heats the water up to like 90 degrees, and then it's recycled out into the ocean.
I don't know about that, Rob. I'm not familiar with any of that. I haven't seen any water circulation systems on onshore turbines, and I don't think that's the case offshore.
Okay. But onshore, what is it?
Well, I think they're, because they're using, there's oil that they use to lubricate the systems, but I don't think there's any kind of other auxiliary radiator or any kind of water cooling system. But I do want to point out a couple of other things, just since we're talking about whales. And I have to say, when I was in the Galapagos with my family, now it's about 11 years ago, and we saw a gray whale, it was one of the most stunning things in my entire life. I mean, it was near the boat. In fact, we were in a Zodiac. There were about 10 of us, and I was a little concerned because the boat seemed like it wasn't quite big enough for all of us. But the whale surfaced very close to us. It was as big as a tennis court. And I thought, man, we could be in the water like that. I mean, if it cared to ruin us, and it didn't. But it was just absolutely awe-inspiring. And I felt the same just a few weeks ago seeing the humpbacks. And so what are federal scientists saying? And the question is, why are they being ignored? Well, because the Biden administration is, they're in the pocket of the NRDC and the Sierra Club when it comes to this issue. I'll just say it very clearly. And I don't say that as a partisan. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. I'm disgusted. But in 2021, the National Marine Fisheries Service said, I'm quoting from one of their environmental impact statements, increased noise from wind turbine construction and operations and vessels could directly impact important whale behaviors and interfere with the detection of critical acoustic cues. These types of impacts may also be associated with physiological stress and could affect the whale's use of the region. Well, yeah, of course, duh.
It's kind of like common sense. We should know this.
Here's the National Northeast Fisheries Science Center, 2022. Additional noise, direct quote, additional noise, vessel traffic, and habitat modifications due to offshore wind development will likely cause added stress that could result in additional population consequences to a species that is already experiencing rapid decline. They're talking about the right whale. What is the Sierra Club? My friends at the Sierra Club, what do they say? The Massachusetts Sierra Club website. I'm quoting from their website. Because the North Atlantic right whale has such a small population and a low annual reproductive rate, a single whale death can have a significant negative impact on the species' ability to recover. However, this also works in the other direction. Preventing a single whale death can increase the chance of recovery. Well, then, damn it, why aren't you speaking up in favor of the whales? Why this environmental betrayal? It's just incredible to me. And I get worked up because it's personal to me, Rob. It's personal now. And I've seen this, and it's just outrageous that now this administration is trying to do this offshore on the West Coast, where the costs are going to be even higher and the impact potentially even greater.
And so going back to the whales,
sure,
one of the most amazing sights I had ever seen, and it was a very sad sight. There was an orca, a huge orca. It was about 40 feet. It got beached right on the coast here. I mean, I'm just a couple of blocks away from the ocean, and it got beached right up on the coast. And we went down there to the beach, and I mean, the size of this animal was, you see them in the water, but to actually see them on the beach, completely laid out the way it was massive. This was a big, beautiful animal. And for anyone to think that, oh, well, we can live with the cost of losing a couple of these, I can tell you right now, an animal that size, we need to protect them, because the ocean is being degraded right now with pollution, with plastics, with all kinds of crap. And to throw these huge Empire State size monolithic things out, 200 of them, 260 of them out in the ocean to get in the way of these mammals, that's a crime. As far as I'm concerned, this is a crime against nature.
You're not going to get an argument from me. And the part that, again, just chaps my hide, or to quote my late brother, John Bryce, grills my cheese, is in New York, Riverkeeper and the NRDC and Kit Kennedy from the NRDC pushed for the closure of the Indian Point nuclear plant in Buchanan, New York. That one nuclear plant, 2,000 megawatts, provided at times 25% of all the electricity in the city of New York. I mean, just an incredible edifice, incredible, the zenith of our industrial plant, as my friend Emmett Penny calls them, industrial cathedrals. An incredible accomplishment, incredible ability to produce that much power from such a small footprint. These groups claimed that, this is a danger to the public, and therefore we need to close Indian Point, and we'll just replace it with offshore wind energy. So it's not just that they're promoting offshore wind, which will be far more expensive than nuclear plants. an existing nuclear plant that is already paid for and was producing power at a very low cost. It's not just that they're pushing this crazy harebrained scheme that will industrialize our oceans, harm our whales, harm the ratepayers. They did it at the same time they were arguing for the closure of proven technology that was working, already in place, had an ultra small footprint, and was critical to the stability and integrity of the New York power grid. So the betrayals are many here, Rob.
Right.
And I did a different podcast this morning. I was talking about these same things, and I just get hot when I talk about it because it's all so incredibly outrageous. And that was why I wrote the piece that I did on Substack, that the offshore wind energy scandal is even worse than you think. And I'm going to write another piece that the offshore wind energy scandal just keeps getting worse, because in addition to the fact that they're getting these permits, the Biden administration has exempted these companies that are building these projects from the bonding requirements for payment for removal. So, I mean, who do you work for? You federal bureaucrats. Are you working for the corporations, or do you work for the people?
It's funny, when a vessel goes out, a commercial fisherman goes out here, you have to have either a physical person on your boat to monitor the fish you're catching, or they do it through video. Yeah. And that they have to pay for that. Yet they have said that they're going to do no monitoring on the wind turbines. There's going to be absolutely no monitoring of this. They haven't done an environmental impact study whatsoever. They said they'll do that after the project comes in. How do you like that, Robert? I mean, if we were going to put oil out there, they would have done 3 EISs, already. So just thinking about it, and it just blows me away that they're not even going to do it for this wind turbine project until after they get it put up.
It's interesting you bring up the fishermen, because now I think it's about 8 years ago, I went on the eastern tip of Long Island at Montauk, and I interviewed some of the Bonnickers, who are the historical fishermen who live on the eastern end of Long Island, who've been fishing there for generations in relatively small boats and relatively near shore areas. Peter Matheson wrote a tremendous book about the Bonnickers. I think it's called Men's Lives, I think is what it was called. An amazing book. I met Peter Matheson once on a bird watching trip, by the way, but that's an aside. But they're firm. All the fishing groups are firmly against all these projects, because they know that these turbines, these platforms, are a hazard to navigation, and they are. And they also are, many of them on the East Coast are being put in the middle of some of the best fishing areas off the eastern seaboard, the Cox Ledge area. Some of the areas that have already been leased are some prime scallop and prime squid fisheries. So, the way that this has all been done by this administration to curry favor with these NGOs and big corporations, I just find it truly gobsmacking. I mean, it's just, and the fact that now it's underway in California and Oregon, I don't know. I haven't seen any construction activity. Knowing what I know about the permitting process in California, I'm tempted. I would be tempted. I'm not going to put money on the table right now, Rob, but I'm very skeptical that even a single wind turbine will actually be built off the West Coast, because of these issues and because of the power of litigation of local groups and others to fight this. But it's a sad day. It is truly a sad day in the history of energy politics in America, that this corporatism and this renewable energy fetishism has gotten to the point where we're doing wasting money on this offshore wind energy scam. It is a total scam and a scandal on the ratepayer.
And I love, because it is corporatism. This is total corporatism. And the thing is, you were talking about not being a Republican, not being a Democrat. You're disgusted. I agree with you. I feel politically homeless myself. I'm just completely disgusted with most politics right now. But here's the funny thing. There are so many people here in our counties, in the surrounding counties, that are opposed to this, that if you go to the Democratic Party headquarters here, or you go to the Republican headquarters, they have our pamphlets, they have our signs, and both parties are against. That's why I love this issue. It's bringing people together in hatred towards the wind turbines. And I want to show you this. Last night, this was so wonderful. Our commissioners, in a way to fight this, they just put a ballot question. It's an advisory question. This is the SEL, the form that you use, the commissioners use to put a ballot, to put a question on a ballot. And it literally, we're asking the people whether they are for or against the project. And the reason we want to do this is because we believe during the general election, we're going to get about 70% turnout. And I believe we're going to get 70 to 75% of the people here, just by the responses we've been getting, who are opposed to these wind turbines, because they're pretending like we want this. You know what I mean? The federal government, we're from the federal government, we'll do whatever the hell they want. And so we are pushing back against this. We are fighting it. And I agree with you. I think when the studies come out, because there's been 2 really good studies on the whales and actually showing that these are killing the whales and killing the porpoises and the dolphins. They had a study out of Europe. They had a study recently here in America. And so I believe that, like you said, what's happening on the East Coast is going to deter what's happening here on the West Coast before they even start building it. But politically, we are fighting against this, and we're pushing back against the governor. The governor wants it, the legislature wants it, and all the agencies in the state of Oregon want it, and they're trying to push it on rural America. And you're going to love this, Robert. They're going to get 3 gigawatts of power. That's if they get the maximum of what they want. They don't even think they're going to get the maximum, but if they do, they get the 3 gigawatts. It doesn't even the energy doesn't come to us here in Oregon. It's going to go to California.
Yeah. Well, and this is part of the outrage of the entire thing, is just how this is being pushed by the powers that be. And, it's interesting. I'm just talking about the politics here of this, because again, I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. I'm disgusted. And, people ask me, who am I going to vote for in November? I'm like, I might write my own name in,
right,
because we've got, I don't admire either of the parties. And then you got, Robert Kennedy Jr., who just admitted to dumping a dead baby bear cub in New York Central Park. I'm like, if you made this up in a novel, people would say, oh, that's crazy. That would never happen. And, Biden drops out, doesn't explain why he's dropping out. You have, Trump gets shot in the ear. The Obamas apparently, pull the quiet coup. So now we've got Kamala as the Democratic nominee, even though she never got a single vote from a single American in the primary system.
Right.
It's just, this is, it's just like as I put it, that American politics have not just jumped the shark, they've jumped the dead baby bear cub, right? It's just
like you said, if you read this in a novel, you'd be going, bullshit. This is just not real. I feel like I'm watching a wrestling match, but in a political arena. You know what I mean? It's crazy what's going on out there.
Yeah, it's absolutely nuts. And yet, Rob, I maintain this, thought about this a lot in lately, that I'm both more optimistic and more cynical than ever in my life. That my cynicism about the political process and our political leadership, just overflows. And yet I was in Kansas earlier this week, and I'm speaking to the Kansas Electric Cooperatives, and I met a bunch of farmers, and I love me some farmers. I just love these people. Because they work with their hands. They are very practical people. And I've never met a happy farmer, right? Things are just, but they're also among the most optimistic people ever, right. And so that gives me hope, seeing these small town cooperatives and small and rural cooperatives, and seeing the spirit of America and how things, for all the stupidity, my trash got picked up yesterday. The mail gets delivered. We still, for all the stupidity in America, we have all these incredible advantages in terms of demography, geography, the constant strength of the enduring of the power of the Constitution, cheap and abundant, reliable energy for the most part. All of these things are incredibly, powerful, and things that make me believe in the United States. But I'm also, I look at this and I just think, Lord Almighty, is this the craziness that we're facing is just, of something, and the dysfunction that we're facing is
right.
Is truly remarkable.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I got to ask you, because I thought this was interesting. You wrote another book, and it was titled Gusher of Lies, talking about the dangerous delusions of energy independence. Now, most people, and I was one of them, I had thought that energy independence would be a good thing. Explain to us why you think that's a gusher of lies and why that may be a disillusioned idea.
Sure. Well, let's be clear that we live in an interdependent world. So is the U.S. exporting a lot of crude? Yes.
Yeah.
But we're also importing a lot of crude. So it's not that we have become, autarkic, that we have, we've completely disassociated from the rest of the world. No, we're exporting LNG to Europe. They're sending us back dollars. We're sending crude oil to European refineries because they're better equipped to handle it. Whereas we need heavy sour crude from overseas, from Mexico, from Venezuela, from Arab sour. That's how our refineries are set up. So we are not energy independent. Uranium, we still get about 25% of our enriched nuclear fuel from the Russians. So this idea that we're somehow going to secede from the global marketplace, that's not going to happen. It can't happen because we're such a big player in the global market. So we are interdependent in a whole lot of different ways, and we need to understand that. It's, but this idea of energy independence and this this phrase, it gets thrown around in a very loose way, and I understand why.
Right.
But it's not helpful, right? And energy dominance. Okay, well, energy dominance, but I am for cheap, abundant, reliable energy, and that's my fundamental point: is that the expensive energy is the enemy of the poor, and therefore, I'm opposed to expensive energy.
And in fact, in the documentary Juice, the documentary you did, you talked about low watt countries and high watt countries. We are interdependent countries, and we should be. We want to be that way across the world. We want to me, that type of trade is what keeps the peace among nations. And we want people in Africa and in the Middle East and in South America to have the same opportunity to have these low cost energies that are reliable, dependable, because first off, it gets rid of a lot of the volatility of those nations. You know what I mean? There's a lot of governments who are vying for the limited natural resources now. And if you had energy that was cheap and you could get it to these low watt countries and the places I just mentioned, I think you would go farther into opening up their ability to achieve, to do things that we may never have thought of here in our countries or in the developed world. Because they have the ability to do that, like we have the ability to do that. I mean, Africa, there are still some places where they're living in mud huts and have no energy whatsoever. And I think if you were able to offer that to people, you would alleviate a lot of the wars and suffering and starvation that's going on. Am I off mark there? What do you think?
Well, where to start?
Yeah.
Energy is key to human development, and I know we've been talking for a while, and I'm gonna have to go here in just a few minutes. But
okay,
there's one vivid point in the documentary that we published that we put out, Juice: How Electricity Explains the World, now 3 or 4 years ago, and we were in a small rural ag community in southeast of Kolkata in India, and the woman that I met there was named Rahena Jamadar, and she was just very, a beautiful woman, I would guess in her mid 40s or so. And we started talking with my colleague my friend Joya Shree Roy, interpreting from Bengali into English. And I was asking her, well, about her family, and she had 3 kids. One of her children was going to a university in Kolkata, her daughter. And we talked about the fact that she'd had electricity in her home for, I think, about 12 or 14 years, and how great it was, and that they had lights at night. And, and she used it to run the grinder in the kitchen so she didn't have to grind her spices by hand, and how important that was to her. And as we were talking, I asked her, I said, so Rahena, if you'd had the chance, if you'd had electricity when you were growing up, because she'd lived almost her whole life without power, would you have gone to the university as well? And she not even a half second of delay. She nodded her head to the right and said, yes, I would have gone. And it took me a while. Sometimes you have these conversations, you don't realize what the importance of what you're saying or what you're doing.
Right.
It was the next day, and I realized, what she was telling me was that she knew that there was an opportunity that she had missed, and that her potential in life had in some ways been squandered because she didn't have power. And so when you think about this in globally, where you have 5 billion people walking around with clothes that have been washed by hand, well, that means there are 2.5 billion women and girls who are doing that washing by hand. And if they're washing clothes by hand, they're not in school. They're not in the library. They're not learning a trade. So it's the importance of energy, but more particularly electricity to the world, and its importance to poverty eradication and the importance to women and girls, it's beyond dispute. So when it comes to the issue of CO2 and decarbonization and the rest of it, I'm okay. Yeah, I'll take your point. Yes, these things matter, but climate change is a concern. There's no doubt about it. It's not our only concern. So my view as a humanist is that we have to be humanists first and energy realists first, and understand that the hunger for and need for, the absolute need for energy and power across the world is so great that we have to understand that, and understand that these countries are going to do what they have to do to get the electricity and the energy that they need. And well, they should. So, I've jumped on my soapbox here, Rob, but these issues matter. And there's a lot of blindness to the big picture. And that's what I really hope to do in my work, is to get people to understand what's really happening in the world.
And thank you for getting on that soapbox, because that's exactly what I wanted to hear. And I think you're 100% right. I think we are missing opportunities for not having that energy availability. I want to bring you back on some other time. Are you willing to come back on at another time when you can talk a few more things? Because one of the things I want to talk about is you wrote another book called Power, the Myths of Green Energy and the Real Fuels of the Future. I want to go into depth on that, but I know you don't have time right now. So if we can get you back on, I'd love to talk about this book as well. Would you be okay with that?
Well, Rob, as you can tell, I can talk about this stuff for a long time. So, this is what I do. So, of course, happy to make it happen. We'll do it later. We'll do it later this year. But yes, of course.
Well, you did say you were a Texan, right?
Yeah. Well, and I'm proud of that book now. It's been out 14 years, but I stand by it. I think it's aged very well. And it's still popular, still selling. So, of course, happy to do so. But keep up the fight on the offshore wind business in Oregon off the West Coast. It's a scandal what is happening. And I see that what I know in watching this now for 15 years and the rural backlash across America, what's happening, a few people can make a big difference when it comes to these issues.
Yeah, I hope so. Thank you, Robert. Thank you for coming on. We'll get you back on and we'll talk more about this, because I really enjoyed this conversation. And keep up the fight, man. Keep up the fight. And I can promise you we'll do the same. Thank you. And you have a wonderful day, okay?
Awesome. Thank you, Rob.
All right. Take care. All right, that was Robert Bryce, and I can tell you right now, he is someone who I think is absolutely right on the mark with what he's saying. And I love the fact that he says, I'm not a Republican, I'm not a Democrat, I'm disgusted. That is absolutely beautiful, because that's what I think most Americans are. We're a little disgusted by the way our leaders are behaving when there is so much opportunity out there. You have to be cynical at the way that we're running things right now, but you also have to be very optimistic in the innovations and opportunities that lay before us. If we do the right things, we make the right steps, there is so much, it's unlimited of what the world can do. People are extremely they're innovative. Like I said, they're in the ingenuity of the human species. You just look at what we've created. Just, even if you don't like the windmills, just the fact that these people who are building these windmills are going to build something this, almost the size of an Empire State Building and float it off the ocean, and put these big, huge wings on them, 3 of them, the size of a football field. I can tell you right now that it's that right itself is an impressive maneuver. It's just something that I think is just says a lot to the ingenuity of man, even though it's wrong and what they're doing is not going to work. I think there are other opportunities. We'll get Robert back on here at another time, and we'll talk about some of those opportunities, because I've got an idea that he's got some some insight to what future energies can bring us. And so I want to thank you all for joining me. I just want to go over a few things here before I get out of here, because, I got to pay bills too. And of course, as all of you know, I am sponsored. I am sponsored by, let's see if I can get it up here. 3H Tree Service, 3H Tree Service. If you guys have trees that you want to remove here in the Coos County area, call 3H Tree Service at 541-294-1800. Once again, that's 541-294-1800. And Matt Holman and his family, they run 3H Tree Service. They do a spectacular job. They can come in there and remove those trees with some of those trees. Go check out 3H Tree Service. I think they're one of the best people for the job, and they are licensed. And Matt, I think, has even gone further, and he's a licensed a certified arborist. And so that's very important when you're taking out trees. You want to have people who know what they're doing, and 3H Tree Service, they know what they're doing. 541-294-1800. And of course, Tom and Gigs, because this show is pre-recorded, we weren't able to get Tim on here, but that's all right. Hopefully I'll get him on next week, or I'll get him on Friday. But if you have any automotive needs, go to Tom and Gigs. Go see Tim at 135 South Shoneman Street. That's in Coos Bay, Oregon, behind the car wash. It's in the Empire neighborhood. If you live in the Empire neighborhood, or you live in Coos County, you know where the car wash is in Empire. He's right behind there. His shop is. Go see Tim at Tom and Gigs, and he can take care of all those automotive needs. If you need repair your mufflers, you need alignments, you need any other engine work, they can take care of that. And if you want to buy accessories such as side rails, light bars, tonneau covers, they can take care of that too. They do a great job of that, and I highly recommend them. If you need an RC car, one of those little remote control cars, this is really cool for kids. It gives them a basic understanding of how technology works to benefit people. And the remote control cars, it just helps kids to see those types of those type of technology in action. And they're fun to play with. Let's just face it. And I know some of you guys out there, your dads, you like those RC cars, and you don't want to look like a fool playing with your RC car out front. So buy some for your kids, and you can play with your kids' RC cars and have a great time. And if you need some tannerite, they actually have tannerite at Tom and Gigs. I don't know. If you need tannerite for any of, maybe you got squatters at home. I have no idea. Just a thought. And so go check out Tim at Tom and Gigs, and he can take care of all your automotive needs. Once again, 135 South Shoneman and Coos Bay, Oregon. I also have to recommend Herbal Choices for all your herbal needs. If you got herbal needs, I've got a dispensary for you. Herbal Choices. They're sponsors of mine, been sponsors of my show since the beginning. Very good people, and they have really nice stores here in the Coos County area. They've got one south abandoned, beautiful store, well lit, nice parking lot, and they're open 7 days a week. 7 days a week, that's right. So if you have herbal needs, they can take care of those herbal needs 7 days a week. So they also have a store in Coos Bay on 101. They have a store in North Bend on 101. They have a store in Charleston and a store in Reedsport. And I highly recommend you go check it out. They're great people. Herbal Choices for all your cannabis needs. And of course, I am also sponsored by Oregon Firearms Federation, the only no compromise gun group in Oregon. If you need to find out more, go to OregonFirearms.org. You may need that Second Amendment to protect all the other rights that you have. And it's a very important thing because they want to disarm our country. And, it's being from Texas, maybe Robert, I wonder if he goes shooting. I know I go shooting. I love it. I love the sport. And so Oregon Firearms Federation, they put out a newsletter once in a while. He doesn't overwhelm people with his newsletters, and I love that. He sends them out when he needs to. And you can sign up for that news alert or those newsletters at OregonFirearms.org. Once again, that's OregonFirearms.org. And we have to congratulate Kevin Starrett all the time for the work he does. One great man. And even though they're not my sponsors, I do like to let everyone know that the Bandon Gun Club here in Bandon, if you need to hone in your skills or you want to go shoot at a 510 trap shoot, you need to go check them out. You can find out more at bandongunclub.org. Once again, that's bandongunclub.org. Great group of people out there. I need to get out there more often and hone in my skills. Great place to go. Also, because Bandon Gun Club doesn't have a rifle range, you know who does? The sports park over there by the dump. Yep, it's on Highway 101 over there by the dump. Instead of going right, you take a left into the sports park. And you need to find out when they're open. Sometimes they're not open all the time because it's based on the volunteers. It's an all-volunteer group out there who watches and manages the rifle range. 100-yard rifle range. You can sight in your telescope. You can go out there with your handguns and also go shooting. And you can find out more at TiogaSportsPark.org. Once again, that's TiogaSportsPark.org. And as I was talking with Robert Bryce, and I have to tell you guys, we did a wonderful thing. The commissioners did a wonderful thing on Tuesday of last week, and that is they passed an advisory question to put on the ballot asking people if they support the windmill project or not. And it passed. All three commissioners, they voted for it. Here it is. And it's just asking if you want the commissioners to oppose the windmill project or not. And it's going to be yes, we want them to oppose it, or no, we don't want them to oppose it. So on the one in Coos County, we're asking people to vote yes in opposition to the windmills. Yeah, I know it's one of those yes means no, no means yes, but that's okay. If you read the question, it's very simple. It's asking if you as a voter want the commissioners to fight against this and oppose the wind turbine projects. Yes, we want them to oppose it, and so we need to get active with that. It's something that would be very helpful, very, very helpful. And so there I am. Hey, I just got back on. There you go. So I hope you all keep tuning in. We're going to have more rallies against wind turbines. We're going to be having more events. I mean, what the commissioners did with this vote, and I'm recording this. It's a pre-recording. So you're seeing this on Monday, but I actually recorded this on Wednesday. And tonight I'll be going to the Curry County Commission to get them to put the same type of question on the ballot, asking people whether they are for or against the wind turbine project. So we've got two counties who are doing the right thing. They're going to ask the voters if they're for or against these projects, and now we've got a campaign. Literally what the commissioners have done is given us a huge campaign. I don't know how much the wind turbine companies are going to come out here and try to oppose or try to stop the people who are opposing the wind turbine projects. I don't know how much money they're going to put into it. I don't know if it's worth it to them. Anyone who comes out here and talks to people, you'll find out very quickly most people are opposed to this project. No matter what side of the aisle you are politically, most people are opposed to this project. And so I don't know if they're stupid enough to try to come out here and spend a lot of money, but I would like them, if they try to, let's waste as much money as we can. We're going to be active in this campaign. We're going to be seriously active. We're going to have events. We're going to have rallies. We're going to get people initiated into the campaign process, because this is the type of issue that all people from all different ideologies and beliefs can come together and agree that this is wrong. This is wrong because it's not fiscally sound. Most of this is going to be paid for by the taxpayer, and it's not going to result in too much energy from all the waste that they're going to put in our ocean. I mean, 262 wind turbines the size of the Empire State Building out in the ocean, and it's only going to produce 3 gigawatts, that's only if it's getting its maximum production. I mean, most of the time the wind, it blows out there, but it doesn't blow. It's either too fast or it's too slow, and they're not getting a lot of production from the wind turbines. So I don't know if they're going to actually get those 3 gigawatts. But that's what they're shooting for, is 3 gigawatts. And they're going to destroy our fishing industry and the seafood processing industry here in southern Oregon just to do this project. So we got to stop them. And that's why it's going to be a hard campaign. We're going to come at them really hard. And I know you people in Coos County and Curry County and the surrounding areas, hey, we're tough bastards. And we're not going to let the people up north, the Oregonians up north, the Portlandiers, the people from Eugene, we're not going to let them steamroll us here on the South Coast. No, we're not going to let that happen. We fight back. And I know you're going to want to fight back against this. So join us. You can find out more at our website. Our website is oawt.org. That's oawt.org. And here's some of the stuff that's on our website. You can check it out. This gives you a graph right here. This shows you the floating wind turbines and the array that they're going to be putting to. Then they're going to have a substation where all the electrical cables coming off the turbines are going to go to the substation. And then they're going to have another underground cable going to the power station, which is going to be on shore. And then they're going to transfer the power from the power station from here in Coos County and Curry County all the way over to California. Now, let me ask you, how do you think they're going to do that without causing a lot of disruption and for property owners? We're going to have to do a lot of eminent domain. This is going to be really, really bad. And I loved how Robert Bryce, he was using the term corporatism, because that's what this is corporatism. And corporatism is the economic system of a fascist country. And so that makes you wonder, are we living under fascism? Because that's what corporatism is for. It's how a fascist country runs its economy, through corporatism. Through communism, the government just outright owns the corporations. But under fascism, they cooperate and work with the corporations. It's the marriage between corporations and government. And I don't want my government to be married to the corporations, because sometimes the government is wrong, sometimes the corporations is wrong, and you don't want them living together, deciding what's best for you wherever you live. And living here in rural Oregon, I don't want to see this happen. And I know many of you don't want to see this happen. So go to our website, oawt.org, and check out the information. We're going to be, that's just a simple landing page right now, but we're going to be cleaning that up. And we're getting ready for a huge campaign, and we need help. We need help. If there's some way that you can help us, you can contact me, Rob, at Rob Taylor Report, or you can go to Facebook. We have a Facebook page. That's something that you can also do. Let's see if I can get that on the screen here. Yes, our Facebook page, Facebook Oregonians Against Wind Turbines. That's our Facebook page. That's our logo there. Look for our logo. If you see that and you see our people out there, hopefully they're able to answer your questions, or they can send you to a place where you can get those questions answered. And if you're not sure, then go over to the Facebook page. And if you want to contact us, you can contact us through that page. And that's, once again, Oregonians Against Wind Turbines. What can I tell you? This is just going to be a bad thing, and this is what's going to happen. This is the river Styx. This kind of looks like West Texas. I don't know, but yeah, we don't want our oceans looking like the river Styx here, and that's kind of like what these turbines look like. Driving from Amarillo to the Texas border, it was like. It was like a level of Dante's Inferno. It just was so, I don't know, it was just out of place to see all those wind turbines in Texas. I don't know if the Texans have gotten used to it, But I myself, driving through there and not seeing what they have done to West Texas, it was mind-blowing, because the windmills, much like this picture, as far as you could see, was nothing but wind turbines. And I think it's a horrible idea. I don't even think they understand what they're going to do to nature with these turbines. And it eats up so much of our agricultural land, so much of our natural just the natural part of the land. You know, if you're a conservationist, there was a lot of land that could have been, a conserved area, a conservation area, and you got windmills on it. I don't know. I don't get it. I just think it's a horrible idea. So we're going to get Robert Bryce back on here, and we're going to talk about some of the future technologies in energy, because, like I said, they're in third world countries where they are low-watt countries, meaning they have very little energy. If they had free, cheap energy, I think we could open up the world to new innovations that we haven't even thought of here in the developed world. And I don't know what that is. I mean, it's endless what humans can do. Like I said, we just have to have the ability and the opportunity to do that. And having free, or at least cheap energy to be able to do that. And we'll talk to Robert about this. I wonder what his ideas on. I mean, Tesla thought that you could take energy out of the atmosphere, just literally free energy out of the atmosphere. And I think that would be a beautiful thing if we could somehow harness that energy and literally give free energy to people all over the world. Of course, the corporations, they're not going to like this, and that's why it's corporatism. They have to use the power of government to force us to buy their expensive energy. They have to use the power of government to tax us and to take our money to pay for these really bad wind turbine projects, and even the solar projects. I think those are bad ideas as well. I think these solar farms, and I hate that term, solar farms. They're not farms. You're destroying farmlands and other agricultural lands. Put up these huge solar arrays, and I don't think we even understand what damage they can do to nature and to humans by this agricultural land or natural areas. I think it's a really bad idea, and so we'll talk to Robert maybe in a month or so. We'll get him back on here, and we'll talk about the future of energy, because I think the future of energy is going to be a hotly contested issue. And why? Because the energy companies, these are billion and trillion dollar companies, they don't want to give up their money. They don't want to give up their money in the substitute of free or cheap energy. No, they like getting that money. And in fact, if you watch the documentary, and I highly recommend it, that Robert Bryce did, it's a very good documentary. It's called Choose How Electricity Explains the World. And it does explain the world. I mean, everything we do in the modern world is dependent on the energy available to us to be able to have the opportunities we need to achieve. And so it was a great documentary. So if you get a chance, once again, it's Juice, How Electricity Explains the World. I was up late last night checking it out, and it was a good one. So we'll get Robert back on here to discuss this a little bit further. And I want to thank all of you for tuning in. We're going to have a Friday night rant. I'm trying to get a couple of people on here of opposing opinions to have maybe not so much a little bit of a debate, maybe a discussion on some of the Republican policies that are happening right now. And hopefully this is once again is going to air on Monday, so that means Friday night. I should have been in Roseburg at the Douglas County Fair, and hopefully you'll be able to see that on the Friday night rant that I have every Friday night. So I want to thank you all for tuning in. It's been a pleasure, and we'll see you next Friday. So until then, carry on, Coos County.